Hey guys, I'm going to be doing a book review on The It Girl by Ruth Ware. In The It Girl by Ruth Ware, Hannah Jones's college roommate was murdered. A decade later, the man convicted of murdering her has died in prison, but new evidence suggests that he may not be the murderer. As Hannah delves deeper and deeper into the mystery, she begins to suspect that someone in her circle of friends may have had motive to murder. Yeah, guys, this book, I freaking loved it. It was so good. Another hit by Ruth Ware. Her books tend to not disappoint me. Thus far, with all her books, I've pretty much enjoyed all of them, even though there are a couple that I found a little lackluster. It's like I still really like them. But yeah, this is definitely another hit for me. I highly enjoyed it. There's just a lot going on in this book. It constantly had me just flipping the page, just so eagerly in anticipation. I was just so anxious to know what was going on, who is the culprit behind things, just such a wonderful page turner. I really enjoyed the characters and the story. It's definitely the type of book. It's full of red herrings. Seriously, I have never seen so many red herrings in a book. You guys, it was fantastic. I loved it. So many red herrings, so many twists and turns, so many complex things kind of going on that you got to really kind of pay attention to, because like something could be mentioned way back at the start of the book and then it comes back in a huge way by the end of the book. It was having me just constantly second guessing myself. I was suspicious of every damn character, which was great. Even though I was able to eventually, as the book was winding down, I was able to kind of slowly narrow it down little by little, which was great. And it's like, even though by the time it finished I was kind of suspicious in particular of one person, it's like it was still really enjoyable for my suspicions to like come to light, like, yes, I guessed it right. The way this book is handled, it is handled through two alternating timelines. Our main character, her name is Hannah Jones. We have her narrating her story in the current, in the present, where she is now married, she's expecting her first child, but yes, she's still living with what happened a decade ago, the murder of her roommate a decade ago. So yeah, that is the other alternating timeline in this novel. There's also the 10 years ago timeline, where we get to see Hannah and her relationship with her roommate and her relationship with her circle of friends and whatnot. And yeah, everything kind of leading up to the murder of her roommate, which, yeah, this book is not shying away from that. It's not a spoiler. It's like, if you read the synopsis, it's very clear her roommate is going to die at some point. I really like the use of the alternating timelines in this work, in this book. And yeah, the Hannah of a decade ago versus the Hannah of the present, and her dealing with that fallout and kind of almost this guilt and shame she feels and whatnot in relation to the death of her roommate, and could she have done more? Is there stuff still out there that's just now come to light? Did she put an innocent man in jail for all she knows? I think there's aspects of this book that can almost seem a little bit slow initially, because of the alternating timeline chapters and whatnot. It almost can be a little bit slow, but I think it's really important to kind of have a bit of this slower pacing initially, because Ruth Ware does a really good job building up all of these characters. It's highly vital that you really know and understand these characters and the dynamics within all the different relationships. So that way, by the time you do get to some of the big shocking revelations, since this is a mystery thriller, obviously, by the time you get to those big shocking reveals and revelations, it's like you're feeling something. You're feeling either disgust or disturbance, or whatever, whatever it may be. You really need to feel all of that as everything's winding down. And so I love kind of that initial slow build up and slow burn of this book, because once again, it's incredibly vital to kind of have that and understand exactly what is going on within all these inner relationships, and what characters are feeling personally, and what's tugging at them, what's their inner demons and whatnot. And in some ways, out of all of the books that I've read by Ruth Ware, there's something about this book that I found the most thematic, if that makes sense. Um, this is a novel that it's about the murder of a young college woman, and it's also the story of how just media in general treats situations like this, especially if it does regard a young woman or even like a female celebrity, you know, how the media treats both the victim and the murderer. And how that there's that clear divide. Someone is clearly the hero, someone is clearly the villain, you know, and there's no like depth there, like there, you know, there's more to the story, you know. And yeah, a lot of times what the media fails to recognize a lot of times in situations like this is that victim and murderer, they're all human at the end of the day, and people are prone to mistakes and making foolish decisions. um, but yeah, the media kind of ignores that human frailty. You know, the human frailty is kind of lost in within that, and people are just strictly hero, strictly villain. um, and that's a complicated thing, you know, especially when it comes to a murderer. You know, that's a complicated thing to kind of reconcile with, because we immediately see a murderer, they are the villain, they are the bad person, you know. So yeah, Ruth Ware is really tackling some interesting things in this book, and kind of putting you putting you, the reader, in an almost uncomfortable position at times. And then yeah, as far as like the victim goes, the way the media portrays a victim, the victim is, especially if it's a woman in this case, um, that the woman is strictly kind of seen as the victim, and within that, they are either put on a pedestal and treated like a saint or treated like a goddess, or they're treated within the context of being a victim once again, but this time on the kind of other end of the spectrum, being treated as just that, the victim, someone who is abused and whatnot, and sometimes even kind of vilified. There's some of those occasions that the victim could be vilified or demonized, especially if it's a woman, once again, and because of their sexuality. So once again, as I mentioned, I think this is kind of one of Ruth Ware's more thematic books in that regard. Just how women are treated in the media, especially if it's a murder case, how the murderer is treated, how we view murderers, how we view victims. It's a very complex thing, and a lot of times the people are left behind, you know. um, it's important sometimes to kind of look more at kind of just human nature and human flaws. um, Sometimes you need to understand all that to understand a situation. So the young woman in question who is murdered in this book, her name is April Clark Cliveden. She's Hannah's roommate. April apparently on the surface has it all. She's beautiful. She's here at Oxford University, so she must have intelligence. Yeah, she comes from wealth and privilege. She's an Instagram influencer. But yeah, Hannah gets to see kind of the other side of that, since she is the roommate of April. Hannah gets to see the other side of that April has her moments of insecurity, she has her flaws, she's very human. She's actually like a very messy person. She's not like a neat freak like most people would maybe think. She's actually a messy person. So I like kind of that relationship between April and Hannah in this book and whatnot. So once again, the media comes into play when April is murdered and whatnot. April is kind of treated a certain way. She is treated as the it girl, as the title of this book suggests. She is treated as the it girl, the girl who had it all, and now she is just simply a victim. And a lot of the nuance of her character is lost in the media. You know, her more complicated nature, her negative sides, but also her positive sides. You know, but yeah, Hannah knows the truth of the real April and whatnot, and that kind of causes her frustration. How April is treated over the decade, that she just kind of simply becomes the victim and someone to be placed on a pedestal all of a sudden. So then, yeah, we flash forward the 10 years, and yeah, when April's murderer dies in prison, there's like some new evidence that comes to light. A journal is kind of investigating some things, and there's pieces of the puzzle that aren't quite adding up. There's like loose ends and dead ends and whatnot, things that don't quite make sense. So this journalist comes to Hannah saying, hey, if you can tell me more and whatnot. So this puts Hannah in this whole whirlwind of emotions, because she's already had to live with this murder of her roommate for a decade. It's still very painful, and now the fact that maybe she put an innocent man in jail, even though this man was a stalker and a creep, still he did not possibly commit murder. She sentenced a man to prison essentially. and prison probably is what led him to his death, you know? So she feels like that side, that guilt of that side of things. Like, did she send an innocent man to jail? Even, like I said, even if he was a creep and a weirdo, he still didn't commit murder, possibly. And that's a lot of weight and responsibility on her that she feels. So she feels that, like, oh, I need to reinvestigate things and re-talk to my friends and see if there's something I missed the first go around, maybe that I missed, that the police missed. So through a series of events, complicated issues and whatnot, it begins to dawn on Hannah, maybe someone in my circle of friends is hiding something, covering something up, but why? Why would they have murdered Hannah, and how did they do it? Because everybody in her circle of friends has an alibi, or do they? And another big part of this novel is, does Hannah, is she just getting paranoid? You know, is she getting paranoid? Is she getting worked up? And this kind of allows a nice bit of her being an unreliable narrator, you know. Is she kind of building things up that don't need to be built up? Does she need to just trust in her initial evidence, you know? Does she need to be a little bit more open-minded? Is she just kind of really working things up to the point that she's going to put her own safety and security at risk by opening all this can of worms up? Overall, I highly enjoyed this next book here by Ruth Ware. I just found it really compelling and interesting. Once again, like I said, there's a lot of thematic things involved, you know, how we treat victims, how we treat murderers, and kind of that combo there, you know, how the media portrays all of that. Over the decades, how a victim and a murderer is treated and viewed. And it does it, like I said, it puts you in a really complicated, disturbing place of thought when you think about it, that you don't really want to think about, you know, because yeah, I think a lot of times it's like the murderer is the murderer, there's no reason to be sympathetic to them, you know. So yeah, I definitely recommend this book if you've loved Ruth Ware in the past, if you've loved all of her books. If you've had up and down issues with Ruth Ware, you might want to read more reviews. But yeah, if you've liked her in the past and have had no issues like kind of I've had, this is definitely probably going to be another must for you. That no ifs, ands, or buts, you're going to pick it up and read it. And yeah, I also recommend this book if you like settings like within a college setting, because yeah, this does take place at like Oxford University, and it's following, you know, a group of friends and whatnot. So if you like that sort of setting, I think you'll really enjoy this. And yeah, once again, if you like issues involving like the sensationalism of crime, you know, I think this will definitely be right up your alley as well. So you guys, that is it for my thoughts and feelings on The It Girl by Ruth Ware. Just let me know down below if you read this book, if you liked it or hated it, or if you plan on reading it sometime in the future. Just let me know. So that's it for this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you like this video, you may like these other videos. Bye guys.